The New York Times is in hot water after publishing this image of a child on their front page, claiming he was starving when it turned out the boy had pre-existing muscular and neurological health issues. So as the full-scale war between Israel and Hamas approaches 2 years, the battle for the narrative has reached a boiling point. Human rights advocate Josh Ahrens joins us now. So Josh, what did you think of this photo?
I knew right away something was up because every time something like this comes out about Israel, if you just wait a little while, there's always a backstory. And in this case, there was. And as it turns out, it was definitely a child in need, but not for the reasons that the international press and the New York Times were suggesting. And it turns out that they have exploited this child and the situation of this family in order to smear Israel, when, as you mentioned, there was much more to the story.
Well, let me read you something from the Times of Israel, Josh, about the New York Times making a correction. It says, quote, "A correction was added to the article accompanying the photo online. The statement was posted on X," and here it is, "to the New York Times public relations account, which has some 89,000 followers. It was not posted to the New York Times main X account, which has 55 million. So Josh, this seems to be a trend about Israel. Whenever there's a correction or a retraction, it always seems to happen a few days later and kind of on the side. And by then the damage is done. So how should people be looking at this situation?
Yeah, I think there should be a new rule that the retraction should be as big as the original mistake. They're claiming it's a mistake, but we know that they had the backstory all along, and they do what the press often does, which is they publish it and then they do it so quickly that they can claim that they didn't know, and then they can print a little retraction later that no one ever sees. I think the retraction, if they are truly sorry for this mistake, then it needs to be as big and on the front page. And it can say something like, "We messed up, we were wrong, Israel is not responsible for this." Maybe do a front page that shows some of the 50 hostages who are starving that are still being held by Hamas. Just a little context for why the conflict continues. You have to really be careful because it's an ongoing pattern, and somehow the mistakes always seem to show Israel in an unfair, bad light.
Well, the situation in Gaza has caught the attention of just about everyone, including the United States ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who decided to go to Gaza to see the humanitarian situation for himself. And he just appeared on Brian Kilmeade's show. Let's take a look of a clip.
The GHF food program is working. It's working very well. In fact, today we passed over 100 million meals having been served in 2 months. We kept the president's direction to us when that was set up, and it was simple. Get food to the people, but don't deliver it in such a way that Hamas can steal it. Brian, Hamas has been stealing about 80% of the food. Some say even more than that. And when they steal it and they loot the trucks, then they turn around and they sell it.
So Josh, is this misinformation that we saw from the New York Times, is that a new thing with regards to Israel?
Unfortunately, it's not at all. There's a long documented history of misinformation regarding Israel, and really always tilting to show Israel in a bad light. In fact, it also just came out in a leaked email from the top of the BBC telling its reporters to report on the situation in Gaza, again, in a way that makes Israel look like the sole responsible party. This is ongoing.
You know, what's frustrating for me is I think obviously as believers in Yeshua, our heart breaks for what's happening in Gaza. Our heart breaks for the struggling Palestinian people. I don't think you have to choose one. Like if you support the reestablishment of the state of Israel, the Jewish people's right to self-determination, you see that they're fighting this like maniacal demonic entity called Hamas. That doesn't mean that you have to turn a blind eye to the suffering of the Palestinian people. This isn't a dichotomy. You can have so much empathy and so much love for the people. I know you and I have been there collectively, probably 60 times, and we have tons of Palestinian friends and close friends. In a lot of ways, I have almost more Palestinian friends than Israeli. But I think the obsession, and that's what it is to me, the obsession with condemning the Jewish people is something that I have to look at and think to myself, something's off here. On CBN News, for some reason, God has me covering the Christian genocide, genocides happening against Christians in Nigeria. And the world just doesn't seem to care. There was a horrific attack on a church in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Upwards of 40 Christians died last week. No one cared. The Druze and the Christians are being massacred in Syria. Crickets. But when something happens in Gaza or in the West Bank or anywhere, it is just this. I always hate saying this, but it's true, and it breaks my heart that if there's no Jews, there's no news. And so, Josh, I think there has to be a third way to love and support Israel and the Jewish people, and also to love and support the Palestinian people, the innocent folks who are suffering. So, Josh, how should a Christian be deciphering? How should Christians have discernment when they're trying to understand what the reality of the situation is?
Yeah, there's a quote from a good friend of ours, Raj, who is a Christian Palestinian, that comes to mind. She risked her life to give a talk in support of Israel, and she said it's not a soccer match. So you don't root for one side or the other necessarily. You root for something higher. You root for peace in the region. You root for the truth to come out. Love for Israel, the Israeli people, and love for Palestinians go hand in hand. You can't love one and not the other. And I think what we see happening is that those who claim, many of those who claim to love Palestinian children, let's say, only really speak up when it's a way to demonize Israel. They don't speak up for them when Hamas is abusing them or murdering them, as they've been doing since 2005, Raj. Hamas has been there since 2005. They seized power violently, and they've been brutalizing the Palestinian people. And all the people that are talking about it now have not been talking about it for the last 20 years. And you and I have, and we've talked about it a lot. And so when you do, you see how this is all connected. And if you want to solve the problem, you have to point at what's really causing the problem. And that's Hamas and the terror groups who are massacring Christians and Druze and so on, like you said, Raj, in these other countries. They're all connected. And they're all trying to do the same thing. And that's what they did to Israel on October 7th. And so we need to remember that and have compassion for all the victims of these terror groups.
One of our mutual Palestinian friends always says something to me. He says, not to me, he says it to everyone. He says, you can't love the Arabs and hate the Jews, and you can't hate the Jews and love the Arabs. There's room in the heart of God for both people. Now, what that looks like, how do you solve the situation? I don't know. But I do think it's incumbent upon us to have discernment that there is it's not just Hamas versus Israel. I think that there are, without overstepping, let me just say it this way. I think it's incumbent upon us all to have a little bit of discernment, to all take a second when we see some things to make sure that is this right? And I think this image that's gone around the world, the front page of the New York Times, is a perfect example of that. To just guard your heart a little bit and to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, because the result of this is the rise of anti-Semitism like I've never seen in my entire life. My Jewish friends all over the world are scared. In the UK, all over Europe, Australia, the rise of anti-Semitism is unbelievable. South Africa, there is a condemning, a singling out, a scapegoating of the Jewish people that I never thought I'd see again. And again, that doesn't excuse anything or say that there isn't a lot of complicating factors. I just think that the scapegoating and the demonizing of the Jewish people is a trend for the past 4,000 years. I think we need to be careful and make sure that we're doing our homework, and knowing that to be for one doesn't mean you have to be against the other. So Josh, I appreciate you coming on and discussing this this very convoluted, controversial subject, and trying to give us some wisdom in it. Josh Ahrens, thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Thank you, Raj.